frankly, structurally, this movie is just perfect. Hello everyone, welcome to the Weeb Initiative. I'm your host, the Weeb. This is the show where every other week I'll be talking about anime, manga, and everything in between. This week, I'll be talking about, to basically finish up this trifecta of Kobayashi-san, talking about Kobayashi-san no Maid Dragon Samishigariya no Ryuu, or A Lonely Dragon Wants to Be Loved. Basically, this is the Kana movie and the continuation from season 2. This movie has been aired starting June 2025, so I think when I reviewed the first season, I may have gotten a thing or two wrong. One of those being the fact that the movie was already out. I did think that it was still in the works. I don't know if we'll have an English release, though easy to say, right? The movie's already out there if you are willing to search for it, let's say. Anyways, so before I start, first the specs. So this is done by Kyoto Animation, as I already said, first released in June 2025, and at this point does not have a dub. It's something that will change your availability of watching this. With that being said, I also need to address some disclaimers. The first one is that I will talk about most of the things that happen in this movie, though I'll try not to really spoil everything because lo and behold, there is actually a twist in the middle, so I would not want to spoil that part because I think it's first off integral to the whole plot of it, and also because I do think that this movie is, although sometimes over the top and for the most part a bit too obvious, maybe too tropey in some ways, I do love this movie so much, and in that sense I would prefer not to spoil everything. Also, this movie has 1 hour 44 minutes, something like that, which to my, at the very least, to comparing to the other things that I watched recently, namely both Love Live and Uma Musume, I would say that this is actually pretty long for an anime movie. I do know that it's not necessarily that, because for example Kimi no Na wa I think it's 2 hours, but even then. Also, it has I'm reviewing this not having read the manga, not knowing the source material, and I am assuming that for the most part, or I will say that the basis of most of my arguments in the review are taking in consideration that this may not be canon to the source material, because at the same time that I can see it being canon, it feels a bit too accessory to the main plot, and I would probably say that a third season would be continued and not really reminisced from the movie. That is to say that this movie is really just a side story more than something that is integral to the plot, though I don't know that for a fact. I have not read the manga, so pardon any inaccuracies in regards to the actual story of everything. And with that said, let's get to the story. So basically, this movie starts it is really simple in that sense. It is the continuation of the second season, so we have Kobayashi, Toru, and Kana living together. We already have also Iruru, and Iruru is already working at the Dagashi shop, which is something that happens in the second season, so on and so forth. And everything kind of starts really normal for a Kobayashi I would say season, but a Kobayashi movie and a Kobayashi episode, but anyways. And the one theme that keeps appearing on is that of parents, right? So we have a bit more of focus at the start on Kana and this recurring theme of parenting and stuff. That being said, it is something that is a really great thing that they set up from the second season onwards, especially by the end of the second season. They did have, I don't know if it was the 9th, the 10th, one of the last episodes, we did have a specific segment where Kana runs from home, and that is in retrospect a really good setup for this movie in itself, because now we do have the appearance of one big dragon, same as when Toru's father appears in our world. Every one of the dragons feels it, and everyone does something different. So, for instance, and this is something that is, I will not say addressed for the most part, but it is something that is somewhat noticeable, I would say, considering that this is a movie. But the one thing that I think structurally first we need to look at is that the main character for this is Kana, though she does not have, I would say, the most in terms of screen time, I would say, though she does have the most highlights of the whole movie, in many senses for that matter. But one of the things that I would like first to highlight here is the way that they manage characters in general. So, for instance, it does have a weird feeling considering the stakes that are presented when, lo and behold, Kimun Kamui, or aka Kana's father, appears, is that the distribution of characters don't actually work in terms of the normal series. For example, I think Takia, if he has like 3 lines, is the maximum. Shota is basically the same. He has like 5 lines in one scene and then he just vanishes. For the most part, Elma is just tacked on for maybe 2-3 scenes. Fafnir is the same thing, and then for the most part that's it. Iruru also becomes a bit tacked on. She does have, let's say, somewhat of a important role in the middle of the movie, though she does not have that many scenes in itself, and basically the limelight is only on Kobayashi, Toru, Kana, and Kana's father for the most part. With that said, the whole thing starts with they explaining, first showing off really the kind of relationship between Kana and her father. They don't actually mention her mother, which I find kind of strange, because I swear that at some point they did mention her parents in plural and not only her father. But either way, the idea is the same. It kind of has the same like vibes from when Toru's father appeared in the first season, and so much so that for the most part, and this is something that I want to highlight too, is that to watch this you don't actually need to watch the 2 seasons, though I would say that short of reusing whole scenes, they do have some throughout the movie, and this is for a lot of things, they do have flashbacks from the first season to the second season for a whole lot of different subjects, and they just show some frames of it and don't actually show the scenes, which then tells me that you do need to watch the 2 seasons to actually watch this movie. But then the whole thing is, and going back to the story, I just went into a huge tangent, but going back to the story, so the father of Kana appears. He does have a really quick interaction between him and Kobayashi out of the blue, because Kobayashi doesn't actually know who he is at the start, and it is a really nice scene and stuff. And this is just set up the fact that he's not like unreasonable. He's an okay guy. He is only a bad father from the looks of it. And then with how the movie works, they do explain why finally really they do give a full kind of full explanation of why Kana ended up in our world, banished from the original world and so on, the dragon world and so on and so forth. And in that sense, basically, right, so she broke MacGuffin, which was the Dragon Orb, I think is the name, and absorbed all its powers. This was not, and they do not say this strictly, but they lead the audience to believe that this was more of a prank to call attention as a child who is seeking attention from her parents, because it becomes really clear from the get-go, and I think that this is something that they mentioned very when Kana is introduced in the series, but the way that she is raised is really hands-free, and this is more, like, say, represented in the movie as that, not really that the bringing up was hands-free, more to the fact that they just left her to figure things out for herself, and in the lack of parental attention, she wanted to be noticed by her parents and ended up breaking this MacGuffin and so on and so forth. And basically the setup is that due to the fact that her father, Kimon Kamui, is about to enter a big battle against another dragon because Kimon is in the Chaos faction. The translation on the subtitles is a bit iffy, but either way, due to the fact that Kimon Kamui is in the Chaos faction, the same faction that Toru was related to, but not really in, he's about to enter a fight with the Order faction, which is the Elma faction, and he needs the power of the MacGuffin back, and so basically kinda needs to basically remake the Dragon Orb because he apparently can do it. And easy to say that it becomes really like sentimental blackmail. How do I say that in English? The first conflict really is between, let's say, Kana and her father, though it's kind of Kobayashi and Kana's father, but it becomes kind of that Kana wants to help her father if it ends up with him noticing her as his daughter, and Kobayashi in that sense does not approve of what he's doing because it's clear and he is really honest about it. There's no and there's nothing subversive about it. He's really honest about his interests, and he just comes to look for Kana to get the MacGuffin, and he wishes that she will fight alongside him, not really seeing her as his daughter, which then brings the thing about parental love and stuff. And the whole crux of the conflict at the beginning is that Kobayashi does not approve of this because she sees Kana as needing a parent, and this is something that will come up later in the movie. But as with Toru, Kobayashi does not choose to really engage in the, let's say, substitute role of a parent. She is Kana's guardian for the most part, but she's just a friend doing it. She's not really Kana's mother for that sense, or Kana's father, either way. And for that reason, the whole thing kind of goes from there. So at the very start of the movie, it's the whole thing is really one-dimensional, really Kobayashi-san like. So the whole thing is about how much they try to, so for instance, right, so they start communicating between themselves, so between Kana's father and Kobayashi and Kana, through letters that Toru delivers from by hand from one word to the next. And it is really funny in the way that they set up, because as we see most things happening, Kana does embody the ideas that Kobayashi has about her father, and not curses, but begins to be upset about stuff and so on and so forth. And it is a really funny setup for the most part, though on the side, both Hiruru and Toru begin to investigate the crux of the conflict that he's about to get in, and this then leads us to the actual conflict, that basically Hiruru and Toru find out that there is a human wizard from another world that is basically pulling the strings in this whole conflict between the dragons, and the end goal is basically a really roundabout way of vengeance, that he wants dragons to kill each other. And they do give, let's say, justification for this, though and this is my opinion really, I do think that they played too safe, and they really don't leave much room to any kind of twist in that sense, because the villain reveals themselves way too easily, and as nobody ends up dying for the main cast, it becomes really easy to see that how this whole thing is going to end. In that sense, again, this movie is kind of tropey, though I would say it hits all the correct notes for the most part, so I just leave it at that. The movie for me is perfect, it works, and in that sense I just think it's neat. And then basically Kana ends up running from Kobayashi's home. Kobayashi in more, let's say, I would not say interventionist, but she started this series, and this is looking throughout the series really. She started really hands off with everything. She didn't want to get involved in stuff and other things, but as the series goes by, and this is something that we see from mostly from the end of season 1 to the end of season 2, and this is something that has been developed throughout the whole series and stuff. She finally chooses to help Kana, and to do that, she ends up with what I would say is the logical conclusion of season 2, when she notices that the language that they use to program stuff in her company is the same as magic. And then we go into the fact that Shota's father is actually a wizard, and so on and so forth and whatever. To say that, first of all, she ends up kind of learning magic for one use only, and this is something that comes up really later, really in the end of the movie. It is really funny and cathartic stuff, and this is a thing, right? So, and this may be, let's say, this is not a stretch, I would say, though it is really introspective, I think, is the fact that if you don't, and this is the basis of watching this movie, if you don't think that Kana is cute and don't like the whole thing about how cute things are and how goofy everything is kind of treated in this series, you probably won't like this movie. Because, and this is a thing, right? This movie is one part Kobayashi-san, and another part is a show off of Kyoto animation capability, because they do have, and I mean, it's 1 hour 45 minutes. They do have more fighting scenes than the whole series combined in one single movie. And all of the fight scenes are really, really, really great. And in terms of pure animation, awesome. I'm being serious here. The animation is beautiful. The animation for the cute parts is beautiful too. The more cutesy kind of climax things are really nicely done, and everything else. And the whole thing is that we do have a lot of things to... And it's really hard for me to say anything else, because at this point, if I keep on talking about the story, I will enter in the fact that there is a plot twist by the middle. But I do need to, at the very least, say what happens, because at the end of the day, there is a big fight, and everyone's involved for the most part. And really, and this is something that does not really come from... You need to actually watch this to get it. But in terms of size, and this is one thing that I thought it was really funny, is that in size comparison, even if you take like Toro, who is a big dragon in her dragon form, Kimon is giant, like holy and this at some point it becomes just a huge auto farm for everyone. It's really nice. It's a really nice fight, the final fight and stuff. But going back to the story a bit, there is then a part where basically everything's going to shit, and basically it's now or never, and everything's pushed to the logical limit. So kind of ends up being tricked by the mage who's pulling the strings to appear in front of her father and stuff. And basically, right, she runs from home, leaves a note to Kobayashi and Toro. And then we find out that in her trying to get to the other world, because she cannot open portals by herself, she needs to find the portal that someone else opened for her. She ends up meeting with Saikawa in the middle of the street. And this is something that I didn't really mention Saikawa really at the beginning, because Asakawa is just let's what I would say kind of human companion, because every one of the dragons does have a companion, more or less. There's no like, and this is something that they don't actually say out loud, but it is something that really does, like, it's the standard stuff for this series, is that no dragon that stays on the human world stays without a companion. So Lukua has Shota, and talking about Lukua, really, Lukua is basically absent. Shota appears just to say that Lukua for the most part is absent, though even though she's in the observation faction, who's which is the faction that basically does nothing when there's conflict, because she believes that she should not really interfere with conflicts and stuff. She does interfere, and then there's the whole thing about herself and her internal struggle. But I'll get there when I get there. But anyways, and so basically every one of the dragons needs to have, as a standard for the series, needs to have human companions. So Fafnir has Takia, Toro has Kobayashi, Kana has Kobayashi, though Kobayashi is the main character, so we don't. She can have that, and you're gonna say, Iruru has Kobayashi too. No. Iruru has Takeru, I think. The guy who works with her or lives in the house which the Dagashi shop is in. Anyways, so basically, right? So whole thing, TLDR of the whole thing, back to the story. So there's this whole really, oh man, it's not really hard to watch in some sense. It's not something akin or that I would compare to something like Sweetness and Lightning, which had really hard to watch scenes because both parts are right and wrong at the same time, and it is kind of weird feeling and stuff. It is more, and this is due to what has happened until this point of the movie, but it is really like final, so it does kind of wrecks my heart a bit, but it's not really that hard to watch. But basically Kana says, I will be back, and leaves Saikawa crying there and stuff. I know that it is really haunting, the face that Kana makes when she meets Saikawa. At this point, it is the point where, oh my god, I'm leaving a huge part of myself here. And basically, right, they set it up so that it does feel like she will not be back. So it's both face lie, basically, that she will come back. So the whole thing kind of leads up to this. Kobayashi gets her, let's say, crash course in magic and heads to the other world with Toru, though they are separated due to shenanigans. And then we do have side story. I think it's just padding, and for the most part it's just to bring the mood back up, because at this point the whole thing kind of is pretty depressing. But and also there's these two, let's say, side by side ongoings of Toru and Kobayashi trying to reach the castle where Kana's father is, and Kana is there too at this point. And basically Kobayashi suffers throughout the whole of the world, basically running around with the help of the fairy that they save in the second season. It's really, this is a really deep cut, but I am really happy that they did something like this, because the fairy, and this is like one segment the whole season that nobody, it's one of the, like, not really the great segments, but it is one where it is character building for Kana specifically, and they just kind of recover that. It is one single segment where they go to the school and try to find a ghost, but it ends up being just a fairy, and then they help the fairy go back to the original world and stuff. And so this fairy that actually does not have a name, he appears with his daughter and helps Kobayashi to reach her destination. Meanwhile, we do have Toru, I would say, dogfighting in dragon form against other dragons that basically set up a trap, because they knew that she would be diverted from her original route and stuff, and so they want to prevent her from reaching the location that she wants to go to, which does not really get explained that much of what was the idea of impeding her to do that. And with that said, we have this, I think, 2-minute kind of, maybe a few minutes sequence of Toru fighting and Kobayashi running from stuff or running through difficult terrain and other things. It all culminates in they end up getting to the castle. It kind of has, let's say, a little intermission with some scenes from Kana that end up being just her between the guy who's pulling the strings, and then in the in between that, when finally Toru and Kobayashi kind of meet, they go to the dragons that are accompanying each side, try to review the whole scheme. The guy shenanigans happen. Everyone starts fighting. For some reason out of nowhere, Fafnir and Elma appear to get in some fighting scenes because whatever at this point. Then shenanigans happen. Toru has to fight Kana's father. Ends up being that we have some action scenes, some scenes where Kana is still in the human form trying to stop her father, but her father won't listen and stuff. And the whole thing kind of goes the way that you think it would, added to the fact that Lukua in her like 2 scenes of the whole movie impedes some kind of other shenanigans happening, and basically everyone ends up kind of well. There is a reconciliation between Kana and her father. It's really, really cute. Oh my god. What a lovely movie. Oh my god. And lo and behold, the whole thing kind of ends up nice. We do have, and this is something that I respect the studio a lot by doing it. I don't know if it's in the source material, but I really think that the scene itself is worth. They do have this fake out that Kana has basically left for Ryuu this time, and then there's this whole crying with Saikawa back at Kobayashi's house when they go back to our world. But oh my god, man, it's so nice. And then like Kana reappears because she understands that and chooses to continue on living with Kobayashi and actually living like a human, not really depending on her father, because then she knows that she can go back and visit her father sometimes and stuff. And oh my god, it's a really nice ending overall. And in that sense, and this is something that I really, really appreciate, I wish, by watching this, I really wish, and I'm being real here, I really wish that we do have some more seasons if we do have source material. I don't know, I don't know, I have not read the manga, but I really, really hope that we get more out of this series. I really like this series. I really think it's cute and funny, and cute and funny, and I really like this juxtaposition that the studio makes between this really goofy kind of lighthearted anime and sometimes just smack bang a really nice fight scene for no reason. And in general, I just think that it's neat, really. And I think that's about the review, right? So it's a really nicely done, really structurally sound movie with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It does have there's no real jumps in conclusions. I do think that the development of the villain is really really shallow in that sense. They don't actually give any explanation really for who the person that he lost is, and this is not really a spoiler, but it is what leads him to have this revenge against dragons. And the whole thing kind of is really shallow in some sense. I do think that it is to keep the tone a bit up and not really get too sappy or too melancholy, though I don't know, like a bit more explanation for some of the things, though that may be just me. The overall of the whole thing is that this movie is really nice, and I think the one nitpick that I have is that some scenes really feel like they will have the transition that they had with when you watch the anime. They have the little transition between segments, or even some scenes feel like they would have an advertisement in the middle. I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like it. Anyways, so basically, right, really love the movie. Art really nice. It's really outstanding work that they did. It's really beautiful overall for everything. Animation, again, both the goofy scenes and the action scenes, really, really nice. Soundtrack, I will say that they do have an opening for this movie and an ending. The ending is, I mean, you know, the opening, however, is I will not remember the name of the artist, sorry, but it's the same artist who did the first season opening. It's the opening is so nice. It's so nice. Such a really great thing to hear. And again, I really respect the studio by doing what they did. They really, really got a movie that is not only really nice to watch in terms of structure and stuff, but they did respect the audience in calling back to the actual anime. So we do have that whole thing about if you watch the whole of the anime, I think you feel a bit rewarded by knowing the context and seeing how we have one more step in the evolution of the characters. I think that in itself is really nice. And in general, I think this movie is really great. I really recommend it, and I think that's it. And with that said, thank you guys for listening, thank you guys for watching. Please like, please share, please follow, depending on the platform you're in, and I hope you stick around for next time. Bye.